I just think about the veteran guys that have invested time with me and they're investing time in myself. This is a dream come true for me to be here in the National Football League and try to make sure I live up to that standard every day. I just feel like I'm doing my job. When number 9 comes and throws the ball my way, it's my job to come down with it, and he always makes it super easy. So I think of the ones where some of the under routes in week 1, and we had some over the middle routes this week, plays where he's putting the ball in the right spot for me. I got to do a better job of being able to come down with it.
That was the star, the rookie star of the first 2 weeks, Mr. Puka Nacua, Barry. What a start for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, I think he just needs a little bit more media training because, like, it would have been nice for him to say, you know, I got to come down with it, but it's nice that Matthew Stafford believes in me the way that Matthew Berry did before anyone else. It was, you know, like, just I appreciate the support from Matthew Berry, NBC Sports,
you
and Peacock.
You don't want him to forget where he came from?
Fantasy football happy hour, FF happy hour. Hashtag, you know.
He's very smiley. Very smiley.
He's a very smiley guy. Yeah, why wouldn't you be? If you're getting 15 targets a game,
exactly.
I'd be smiling too.
Lighting up the Niners defense.
Absolutely. Anyway, we love Puka. Puka does make the love list. We've loved him for a long time, like, you know, at least before the season. I know I haven't brought that up a lot, but I just want to kind of like, you know.
It's unbelievable. There's a discussion like who's going to have a better week this week, Puka Nacua or Stephon Diggs. Like,
that is a legit conversation.
Yeah,
it's insane.
It's unbelievable.
25 receptions through his first 2 NFL games. He leads all players with 35 targets. We've talked about this. He's got 10 more targets through 2 games than Justin Jefferson, who's number 2. It's not like they're ignoring Justin Jefferson. He's been targeted on 40% of his routes. 40%. No other Ram is above 18%. And you think about this Cincinnati Bengals defense that faced Baltimore last week. Ravens wide receivers caught 83% of their targets against the Bengals last week. So we should see success from Puka. Welcome to the top 10, Puka Nacua. I have you at number 9.
Our next one here, A.J. Brown, Jay. He's going up against Todd Bowles' defense with the Bucs. And listen, A.J. Brown coming off a week where he only had 29 yards, but we know Jalen Hurts might be looking to purposely get him
the
back
anti-Puka. He wasn't. A.J. Brown didn't give a smiley press conference at his locker after the game.
No, sir.
He also didn't get 15 targets.
This is also true.
Yeah, and look, the Vikings sold out to stop the pass to an almost comical degree, where at some point maybe changes up the strategy blind flowers if they're just running for 6 yards a carry every single time. But I do think that they will be passing more against Tampa Bay. This line is only Bucs plus 4.5. If you asked me to guess the line before the season, I would have said like 8. But the fact that the Bucs have looked solid, the Eagles have looked a little bit jittery. They aren't the fully fledged machine they were last season, but I would suspect that they're going to go out of their way to get A.J. Brown right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Look, again, squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You know, all that narrative. But here's the other thing, right? They're also playing Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's a bottom 10 defense against the pass through 2 games, right? They're allowing over 15 yards per reception to wide receivers. That's 5th most in the NFL. They've given up on 100 receiving yards to a wide receiver in both games this season. And so to your point, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, who, by the way, are very close friends off the field. Like that was one of the reasons why Philadelphia went out and got him from Tennessee was because of the close relationship between Hurts and Brown. And so you heard Hurts in the press conference. Hey, did you hear those things? And he's just like, yeah, man, AJ wants to compete. We're all trying. Like he was nonplussed, which was not a word I thought I was going to say today when I got here. But yes, that's right. Jalen Hurts was nonplussed. I agree that they're going to make an effort to get A.J. Brown the ball, not only to keep his buddy happy, but also because, by the way, he's really good, and it's a nice matchup. So I have him just inside my top 12 at number 11 this week.
Yep.
Earlier we discussed how Jerome Ford makes the hate list because Tennessee's run defense is phenomenal, but their pass defense does not follow that trend, Barry, which leads Amari Cooper making the love list.
Right. So, you know, hopefully he wasn't 100% healthy on Monday night, and still in a game in which Deshaun Watson did not look good, still ended up producing and was solid. The Titans have allowed over 16 fantasy points to multiple wide receivers in both of their games so far this year. They've allowed the 2nd most receptions, the 3rd most yards to wide receivers through the first 2 weeks. We've talked about this. It is a pass funnel defense. You can't run to the Titans. You have to throw. And so Amari Cooper, who has a target share of 24.6% this year, that is the most on the Cleveland Browns. Their run game is in transition. Not a lot is working for Deshaun Watson, but Throwing to Amari Cooper is part of it. I have him as a top 20 play in week number 3.
Yeah, and also in deeper leagues, wouldn't sleep on Elijah Moore, who's quietly had 16 targets the first 2 weeks, even in a run-heavy offense. It's probably going to have to pass more now with no Nick Chubb. And so, I mean, there's not much else there in the pass game because Lawrence's man Donovan Peoples-Jones hasn't set the world on fire thus far. It's Elijah Moore's the clear number 2 in that offense.
We haven't seen it's only been 2 games, but we also haven't seen David Njoku. Like, I feel like this could be a nice David Njoku game.
Travis Etienne made the love list earlier from the Jaguars, and of course now Evan Engram does too. It's kind of that matchup with Houston, Jay, that everybody gets their eyes on, knows they can take advantage of. We've seen the big week from Calvin Ridley. We've seen, the bounce back weeks from the rest of this group, but Evan Engram looking like the guy going into week 3.
Yep, Jags are 9-point favorites. The total is 44, and so a lot of that total is going to come from Jacksonville, we expect. And Evan Engram, I mean, it's been a strange start for the Jags offense. Doug Peterson was talking about how they're kind of almost already running out of excuses for why they aren't being better. And look, week 1, Kirk didn't get much usage, then he gets a ton of usage. I still think they're finding their way, but this certainly is a dream matchup to get right, and Engram should benefit.
He's had at least 5 receptions in both games this season. He's actually, believe it or not, he is running the second most routes on the team. Like, you'd have thought it was after Ridley, it was probably Zay Jones, but actually Evan Engram is running the second most routes. I love this matchup with Houston. To your point, Jay, right? The Colts have allowed the most yards after the catch for reception to tight ends through the first 2 weeks of the season. They gave up 80 yards and a touchdown to Colts tight ends, none of whom you feel like are anywhere close to Evan Engram. That's not an offense that is anywhere close to as good as the Jaguars are at this point of the season. So Engram comes in at tight end 6 for me this week. This should be a big game today.
How about
this week?
Others receiving votes here, led by Mike Williams, who gets to go up against that Minnesota defense. They've allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receivers through the first 2 weeks of the season. George Pickens, who had the big score from Kenny Pickett in week 2. He's got the Raiders. That's a good matchup for him. Jordan Addison against the Chargers. Tank Dell against Jacksonville. Jake Ferguson against the Cardinals. And then Barry Cade Otten against the Eagles.
I think Williams is due for a big game here. Almost a 26% target share so far. Vikings have allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receiver through those 2 games. Williams has an end zone target in each of the first 2 games, just hasn't, really connected yet. I think that's coming. We talked about Pickens. Again, no Deontay Johnson. 35% target share on Sunday. I mean, just unbelievable with the 10 targets. We expect a lot of scoring to be in Las Vegas against that Vegas defense that we don't have a ton of confidence in. Jordan Addison, look, Chargers have allowed 12 deep receptions through the first 2 games. And Jordan Addison, whose snap rate from week 1 to week 2 really, increased, and we saw it against Philadelphia, especially with obviously the run game in transition, I do believe in Jordan Addison. I think he's better than KJ Osborne right now, and I think the snaps and routes run will prove it starting this week. But either way, Addison comes in at 36 for me. How about Tank Dell?
Your man.
My man, Tank Dell. 10 targets. 10 targets for him in week number 2. Played on 78% of the snaps, like it's trending in the right direction. They can't run the ball, again, as we talked about with Dameon Pierce here. And so going against Jacksonville, which we expect to be favored, the Jags, Tank Dell will be a thing, continue to be a thing. I like Tank Dell this week. Also like Nico Collins quite a bit as well. Could have put him on the list. Ferguson, Cade Otten, again, these are second-tier tight ends if you're outside the top 10. But it's worth noting that if I told you, name the tight end that leads all tight ends in red zone targets this year, you might guess Kelsey, you might guess Mark Andrews. It's actually Jake Ferguson, of all people. 63% of his targets come in the red zone. Cardinals have allowed the 3rd most yards to tight ends through 2 weeks. And Cade Otten, 50 yards and a touchdown have been allowed to opposing tight ends, but both games this season by Philadelphia. They rush, they play back. Philadelphia has always been poor against tight ends. Start your tight ends against Philadelphia is kind of a standard rule. They've allowed the most receptions to tight ends through 2 weeks. So Cade Otten, who's sort of a thing, it's kind of Baker's been better than expected. Listen, I'm just inside my top 20, but he's also available in every single league.
Yep. Couple things on this. So on George Pickens, he's clearly the beneficiary of Deontay Johnson going down. I think people thought that maybe Allen Robinson would rise up. It's really Calvin Austin. He's getting the snaps on the outside, so in deeper leagues, don't mind Calvin Austin. And then after that, I think a big kind of fantasy relevant happening from last week was that CJ Stroud showed that he could support multiple wide receivers, even with what's happening with that offensive line. So Nico Collins and Tank Dell, they're the 2 guys there over Robert Woods. And then with Jake Ferguson, I think the fact that Dalton Schultz has been so bad so far in Houston kind of makes me feel better about Jake Ferguson, that just Dak seems to really like looking for his tight end. And so Jake Ferguson's going to have some 2-touchdown games this year, and he's going to win people some weeks. So he is a guy who should not be on waivers.
Let's jump into the hate list from pass catchers, Jay. DeAndre Hopkins has been dealing with a little bit of injury throughout this season. Now he sees the Browns secondary. He's going to go up against a good player in Denzel Ward. DeAndre Hopkins highlights our hate list.
Yep, and I think this has gone a little bit under the radar too because of the Nick Chubb injury and how bad Deshaun Watson has looked. But Cleveland have a top 4 defense in the league right now. They kept the Bengals to 3 points in week 1. I understand Burrow wasn't right, but they still put up 24 against the Ravens. And then you look at just the Steelers scoring 26 points. Well, they scored 2 defensive touchdowns, and then there was 1 breakdown for a 70-yard George Pickens touchdown. This defense is an absolute monster in Cleveland. If DeAndre Hopkins, who is kind of nursing injuries as well, it doesn't seem like a great spot for him.
The Denzel, he's one of my favorite players in the NFL, but have him outside my top 20. Actually, I'm at 25 in my ranks as of today. To your point about the Browns defense, right? Browns are allowing a 41% catch rate to opposing wide receivers. That is second best in the NFL so far this year. The only wide receiver to have more than 40 yards against Cleveland this year is George Pickens. And again, it was all basically on one play where he made an unbelievable play. But again, think about who the Browns have faced, right? So yes, George Pickens, but not Jamar Chase, not T. Higgins. It's a really good defense. And so Hopkins, who played under 60% of the snaps last week, he was questionable with that ankle injury, doesn't feel like he's 100% healthy. He's, again, he's just merely wide receiver 25. It's been an up and down season so far for Ryan Tannehill as well.
Yep.
Our next one, Barry, Hollywood Brown going up against the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense just kind of a murderer's row for anyone to run into.
That's really what it is. I can give you stats. I got stats as to how good Dallas is. Again, they allow the lowest catch rate in the NFL to wide receivers so far this year, under 40%. Garrett Wilson, the only wide receiver to have more than 25 yards against Dallas so far this year.
Yeah,
right. And again, it was one play. Right. It was a missed tackle. And he's Garrett Wilson.
Yep.
Right. And so they're the only team that hasn't allowed a completion of 15-plus air yards this season. Again, the Garrett Wilson play was all after the catch as well. And so, we like Josh Dobbs. We're rooting for Josh Dobbs. But it's Dallas. I think he's going to be under pressure. You talked about the other day, Jay, about how Micah Parsons should be the favorite for defensive MVP, right? And Josh Dobbs is going to be running for his life, and so I think it's going to be a lot of dump-offs to James Conner and Zach Ertz in this game. Maybe some bubble screens to Marquise Brown, but hard to see him getting into the end zone. He's wide receiver 37 for me this week.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks in, and they haven't faced much, but this Dallas defense might be kind of historic. That's what it looks like so far. Micah Parsons is terrifying. The whole defense is terrifying. And Josh Dobbs and the Arizona offense, probably not the team to break it down.
Our last one here, Jay, Kyle Pitts going up against the Lions. And you would think the matchup, there could be something there, but I think we're reaching the reality that Kyle Pitts is not a consistent player in fantasy, especially not in the red zone.
Desmond Ridder looked terrible against Green Bay. He looked absolutely terrible. I suspect that it would be probably a favorite at this point that we see Taylor Heineke take over as the starter at some point during the season. This is Bijan Robinson's offense, and there's not going to be much room to eat for the pass catchers.
There's not enough volume in this offense to support 3 fantasy-relevant pass catchers, and at the moment it appears that the pecking order is Bijan, Drake London, and then Kyle Pitts. He's played 29 career games. He's scored 3 touchdowns. He has single-digit fantasy points in 66% of his career games. He is unstartable at the moment until we see something. I don't love the matchup at Detroit. He's my tight end 13. You're always hoping. Jonnu Smith is getting more targets than him. I don't understand it, but I don't know. To me, he's unstartable until you see it.
Yep.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.